Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Talking Smack, where we talk superheroes, movies, animation, and comics. I'm your host, Josh Scar, and joining me this week is Matt. Matt, how you been?
Doing good. How about you?
I'm doing all right. Very excited for this week's episode, and we're going to dive right into it pretty quickly here because we have Adam Rose, writer of the upcoming comic Corollary, to talk with. And we're going to get a quick break in for our friends at the Sugar Coated Murders podcast. So we'll be right back.
Hey, Ann Barner.
Hey, Karen Beatty.
We need a promo. You know, like where we talk about what we do on our podcast.
On our Sugar Coated Murder podcast? Like how we love to bake and talk about murder?
That's what we need to talk about.
There you go.
I think we've talked about it. Y'all find us on all your favorite listening apps.
Stay sweet.
And don't murder.
Because if you kill people,
we will talk about you.
And we're back. Thank you again for your patience. I hope you enjoyed that spot from our friends at Sugar Coated Murders. But we have a very fun episode here for you this week. We have the writer of the upcoming miniseries Corollary, Adam Rose. Adam, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. And, I had to wear my nod to Voltron today for this. I was trying to figure out what comic related shirt to wear. And you know what? I don't want to get like tangential here, but I paused when I thought about wearing my Red Sun Superman because of what's going on right now. I was like, you know what? There's something off about that now. I got to admit it. So anyways,
I'll be right back. Sorry. I know this is an audio medium, but I'll be right back.
I don't know what he's doing.
I think he's got a prop for us, maybe.
Yeah, right.
Oh, I do have a prop. I've got a yellow Voltron.
Yes.
It's the new Voltron, but I got one.
Hey, that's awesome. Speaking of new versus old, and I really regret not having this, and this will date myself because I had it up until like college, and then I just had my mom get rid of it. But I had a not life size, a
10-story tall.
Yeah, a Godzilla that's this big, and its arm shot off.
Oh
man! It shot flames. It was gorgeous.
That's the dream when you're a kid.
What the heck was that? What's that transformer? That's the giant city. I can't. Metroplex, Megaplex.
Yes, one of those names.
I had one of those. I did not. I was not a big Transformers kid, but my parents bought me one of those, and that thing was like the coolest dang thing ever. It was like 2.5 feet tall, and when you opened it up, it was like 3 feet wide. It was incredible.
Oh man. Well, yeah, no, I could talk nostalgia toys all day with you guys.
Our friends at the Unchefed podcast would love that shirt. I saw that shirt and I was just like, oh, I want it. Where'd you get it? So you have a comic book coming out on as of right now on April 20th called Corollary. I'm going to go through the synopsis that's available on the Previews World magazine right now, and then we're going to kind of dive into this. So in a galaxy filled with twin moons, twin suns, and twin planets, everything comes in twos, even the people. And if your twin dies, so do you. This is the way it's always been. So when Captain Andromeda's twin loses her life in a far-off military battle, and Captain Andromeda does not die, needless to say, the universe demands answers that the captain is willing to give, to the highest bidder, of course. This is Corollary, a 4-issue bombastic sci-fi romp, which if that doesn't grip you, I don't know what will. I read that synopsis and I was like, yes, please, let's talk about this.
Yeah, no, thank you. And it's Corollary is a tough word to say, and you nailed it there. So that
I will admit that a couple of times I'm like, culinary, was it culinary? No, it's Corollary. Yes, I caught myself. Series.
Yeah, Culinary. That would be a different comic.
That would be our unchefed friends going for that one again.
Yeah, no, that you just you summed it up there. I mean, it is action packed. I mean, my goal was to make like every page one that you're dying to turn to see what happens next, as far as the way I like paced it out in my mind. But at the same time, I also wanted you to care about these characters. I wanted you to care about Andromeda and what happened to her sister, and just it's a galaxy. The premise, there's a lot of wiggle room because I realized, well, does that mean I automatically have to have everyone with their twin at all times. No, of course not. So you might see somebody independent of their twin and wonder what's going on there. And then I even realized, and this story has a beginning, middle, and end, but the sandbox I feel like I have here is pretty huge, because imagine, I thought about, well, maybe there are some pretty malicious or selfish twins out there that are afraid that their twin is too clumsy. So they maybe they put them in a padded room somewhere and keep them sedated. Or maybe, like a darker way to look would be something like if somebody really just had enough of it all. So and they didn't have the courage to end themselves, they go after their twin. So yeah, anyways, those are like just kind of the rules of the world that I've just thought a lot about. But for, our characters, it does play a role. And yeah, the whole galaxy is kind of dying to know, how did they survive this? How did she survive? And she's kind of earning money, going planet to planet as like a spokesperson for how she did. And then we, early on, we find out that she's also motivated, not just, it appears as if she's kind of a self-absorbed, money grubbing kind of person, but then her heart shows through, because there are bigger motives for why she's doing all this. And the first issue ends, I hope, in a way that everyone's gonna be just begging for the second one to come, because it reveals a lot of big information that explains a lot and gives us a little more empathy for her. Because if you can't care about your main character, then it's going to be a tough slog. And she's a complicated person, and and the people that she cares most about, they've helped shape her to be who she is.
She sounds like she's got a little bit of a Han Solo thing going on. She's a little bit of a scoundrel, but with a heart of gold.
That is perfect. Yes, I would say, and I'll take that compliment all day for her, because I love Han. Yeah, and I'd also, if you want to go old influences, Buck Rogers. And when I say Buck, I'm not familiar enough with the old comics. I'm familiar with the 80s TV series Buck. And I think that Buck has a lot in common with Han. I wonder if, when he was doing his homework for that role, he thought about Harrison Ford like a few years before him. But yeah, she's swashbuckling. She has a military background, and we find that out pretty quickly, that there is this kind of backstory rift between these two pretty significant planetary players. But we also get just glimpses. Every page you see different. And Rob Ahmad, the artist, like when I would throw ideas at him, there's a courtroom scene, without giving much away, that I wanted the defense attorney to be a anthropomorphic vase, like a giant talking vase. And that's that took some explaining. And then there's in the first issue, we see her on her way to her next gig, and she does stop to do something unselfish, generous, because she gets called in by these floating dinosaur planet or dinosaur cities. There are these just giant floating dinosaurs with cities on their backs, and she's asked to help them out with a kind of veterinarial issue for one of the dinosaur cities.
That all sounds amazingly cool. And speaking of Robert Ahmad, I did want to ask, how did you guys come to the decision on the art style? Because to me, it has a very Saturday morning cartoon look, which I mean that entirely as a compliment. But again, obviously the story is very mature, and it has all of these grand ideas behind the universe as well. So the art style complementing the themes of the story just seem very interesting to me. I love it when a story and the art kind of, they're not necessarily contradict, but you wouldn't think they would go together. And then as you read and get invested in the story, you think, oh yeah, this totally goes.
Yeah, no, Rob and I met through another artist who just, when I described the story to them, they said, oh, you got to talk to Rob. But you're gonna have to kind of sell him on it, because he doesn't know who you are. And so, and Rob lives in England, and I just reached out to him, and he's like, send me the premise, send me the synopsis, and I did. And he's like, I'm in. which was just awesome from the get-go. And then, we started smaller, thinking, oh, you know what? I mean, this is a big idea, big story. Let's try for something kind of a small version of this. And we like thinking along the lines of like 2000 AD, Future Shocks, and like submitting a small version as we worked on the larger one. And that original version, his style was a little more sketchy, I would say, a little more cerebral looking. And then, we kind of went back to page one, and he's like, and he's the one that insisted on this. He's like, I think I have a slightly different take on this now that I've gotten to know these characters. And that's when, like, I feel, and I know this is a big name to say, but I mean it in the most deferential way. But Bruce Timm's style of like Batman animated series kind of came out with what he did again. And then the big leap to layer on top of his style was the experimenting with watercoloring it by hand. And Rob did that for the first 3 of the 4 issues. And then he got fried and was very honest about it. And he recommended this incredible colorist, and Gabby came in and was able to mimic his style of watercoloring digitally for the 4th issue.
Was that all his idea, the watercoloring?
Yeah, he was just, I mean, I wasn't, he brought it up for the cover. And then I said, well, that's so cool looking. Let's, I just haven't seen that in a comic. And I just thought, and as well got encouraged by Source Point Press, Josh and Cameron there. We just said, there's something going on here that we have not seen before, or at least I'm sure it's out there somewhere, but not like this, not matching, as you kind of just, brought up earlier, matching this kind of crazy action science fiction storyline. And then, so he did the interiors, and we were hooked. Because, even early on, I was like, oh, maybe it'll just be certain pages that we do it that way for like certain, maybe that's just what happens when Andromeda's in this kind of mood or whatever. But no, it just made sense for this galaxy. This galaxy is a watercolored galaxy. Cool.
That's awesome.
If you have any questions, Matt, go ahead. I've got a few more, but I feel like I'm hogging the questions.
No, I was going to ask, we checked out a book of yours called Playground, which was super fun, but I'm getting the sense that's more like an all ages book, kids on a playground, the bad guy's the principal, all that kooky stuff. So would you say that this is sort of a shift away from that kind of thing, where it's a little more adult oriented?
Absolutely. I mean, kind of yes and yes. So Playground was, it was always geared to be a middle grade. I'd say even below like all ages, middle grade comic, like for like a target audience of 1st through 4th graders or something.
Sure.
And the premise for that, I still think is kind of fun is, what if somebody had all the powers of the playground? If they play freeze tag, it's real. If they play Simon Says, you're compelled, so that was the simple premise there, and just kind of going against a really mean candy obsessed principal with candy abilities. So that one, and I also just wanted that one to have like a slight encouragement for like like a message of like, hey kids, get off the iPads, go outside.
Sure.
That was kind of, and eat your broccoli without shoving it down their throats. But yeah, now Corollary, the reason I said yes and yes to you is it is definitely geared towards adults, but it also does fall under the all ages umbrella, meaning like the way I think the Guardians of the Galaxy does.
Sure.
I mean, I think a 5th grader can pick up Guardians of the Galaxy and be totally fine. Yeah, there's a little bit of violence. Yeah, sometimes they even show some blood, but it doesn't have like an MA rating on it. And that's what Corollary is. So it still fits under that umbrella, but yeah, there'll be some pages of some violent action sequences. But I think, and that's the other thing, I really do believe like punching down to kids in storytelling is never the right idea. Like look at Hunger Games.
Yeah.
If people talked about that premise before the book came out, they'd be like, well, you're encouraging kids to kill each other. That's terrible. You can't do that. And that's too violent. And kids, you can't make a book like that for kids. Wrong.
Yeah.
You need to, like, kids are always looking like slightly above them, or even more so. Like if you're in sixth grade, you're 12, you want to know what the 17, 18-year-olds are up to, or the 16-year-olds. You want to know what their world's about. You don't want to know about your world. And it keeps going up like that, I think. So Corollary, I mean, it's great for like people our age, and it's great for like kids as well.
Great. Awesome.
So kind of following up on that, one thing that kind of, and I don't mean this to just say like, to mean a bad thing, but like one of the things that we've been talking about in our Talking Smack group is doing things to kind of signify that we're an indie movie because this guy's smoking pot and he's a loser, but he's our protagonist. It's a Seth Rogen movie because you're the
Nice. Great impression.
Yeah, thanks. So like with indie comics, you get a lot of that too. Like you get a lot of F-bombs and other things right up front. Just to be like, we're indie, we're pushing it. We're not Marvel, we're not DC. How far does your book push those sort of things?
Oh, it's funny you bring that up. Because when I was writing it, and it wasn't even like I was thinking, I mean, I didn't, when I wrote it, I wrote it because the story was like, it was in me and I had to get it out. And I wasn't even thinking about the audience just yet. Maybe that was not the right thing. But when it came to cursing, and this was like, it's so funny you're bringing this up, because I had my Battlestar Galactica moment. And I don't know, let me explain what I mean by that. I mean,
you got to be fracking kidding me, man.
Yes, what the frack is going on around here? Hold on a centon. so I played with that, okay? And I realized I was gambling there because it was fun to me, but I know, and in the parlance of kids today, that could be cringe.
Yeah.
But I think it's fun. So no, there is no outright swearing, but there is swearing just in their galactic lingo.
Okay, that's really cool. I like that a lot. That shows some creativity as well to me. So that is very cool. But you were talking about how the story was in you and you needed to get it out, which anyone who listened to last week's episode, which as we're recording this has not been released, so neither of you have heard it. That was kind of what I had to do with my Falcon and the Winter Soldier episode that came out last week. Is there's a discussion there that I really wanted to have. And again, thank you to Rainey from the Red Dove podcast for coming on. But what's the inspiration for you for this story that you just had to get it out?
Well, I guess it started with my daughter when she was about, she was 5, and a friend of hers she knew was suddenly going to have twin siblings. And she just, as I'm like putting her to bed, she says, Daddy, like if a twin is, gets tickled, will the other one laugh? And then my comic book, drenched mind took that to a crazy, darker, violent place. As I was like, wow, yeah, and not that that's original as far as, like, there's like even studies on twins feeling and having vibes of different, each other. I have cousins who are twins, Jake and Alex. They're like young adults now, but when they were in there, but they probably got sick of it. But even when they, at holiday parties or whatever, when they were even as young as 10 or as old as 15 or so, I was like the older cousin that would come over to them and say, hey, I'm just curious, like, when you guys, like when you were in Chicago and you were in New York, did you ever like have a moment where you both were on the same page about something? And they said, yes. I mean, they were like, okay, enough of the twin questions, but they said, yes, sometimes that there was something to that. So I guess I've always been fascinated by it. And then as far as just the storyline of Corollary going into this galactic version of this, once I had a hold of who Andromeda was, I knew where she needed to go, and I knew who her family was. And we find out a lot about all of them early on. And it just kind of, I guess once I get a hold of an idea that I feel this strongly about, I have to see it all the way through. I'm like almost finished with a new script for a comic that I'm really excited about down the road here. That's totally different vibe. It's like a detective fantasy noir. But
That's my jam right there.
oh well, cool. I mean, I'm excited about that, and actually, I don't want to put the cart before the horse on this, but I think I'm hoping to be working with the artist Magenta King. Have you read Dark Horse's Jenny Zero or heard about
I've
it?
not read it, but I've seen
Yeah, so
bits and pieces of
we've
it.
been talking about working together, and this might be something we link up on. But yeah, so as far as Corollary goes, the story just kind of, I mean, it took like a good, year and a half to really get all 4 issues written and mapped out, and then even just revisions and whatever. And then once even Rob was on board, and his style kind of made me go back through and change things along the way. So even through the process, the story would develop all the way up till DC Hopkins, who is the letterer, and he's a pro's pro. I mean, this book is like one of hundreds or thousands for him, and he does the big 2, he does everybody, and his patience with me, even at that stage, like there would be times I'd see it all mapped out with my dialogue on a couple pages, and I'd be like, you know what, DC, you're gonna kill me, but I'm gonna tweak a few things here. I mean, it didn't happen often, but it did sometimes happen, and he didn't kill me. I'm still here. Even, so even to that stage, but Rob, as far as the art and writer connection, he was awesome about giving me thumbnails. And even then I would like go back and say, oh yeah, this fight sequence or this action sequence out in space, this needs a couple more beats. Like so the script was kind of a living, breathing organism that didn't really get done until, DC had it finalized, and the editors at Source Point are like, yeah, this is great.
It's really cool to hear that they worked with you and let you make those changes so far into the game. You hear so many stories about its deadline, it's whatever you have, it's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, DC he was a pro. When it came to that stage, it happened like well, I guess 1 page per issue. As far as that. So that was a quick turnaround as far as what needed to happen. And then, yeah, with Rob, it was really, we've been together on this book for like 2 years, as far as him, like starting from issue 1 through issue 4. And I guess actually the heart of it all was the pandemic, or well, not that we're out of the pandemic, but I mean, just during the heaviest times of it, this kept me going, to be quite honest. I mean, it was a distraction that I really needed.
Feel that, definitely. That's part of why this podcast was inactive for like 2 years, and that partly because I was in school, so that kind of took up a lot of my time. And then once school was done, I was like, I need something to occupy my time, and so we started this back up. And I've been extraordinarily grateful for the community, and we've had some amazing outreach. When you reached out and you're like, hey, you want to talk about my comic? And I was like, ooh, we don't get enough comic talk in here. So we appreciate it. We removed the 40-minute.
Well, I appreciate you letting me come on.
Sorry, Zoom was telling me that I was running out of time, but then they gifted me extra time. So I was like, oh, okay.
How nice of them.
Thanks for interrupting me.
Adam, you mentioned earlier that, this is something along the lines of, this is a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. But they created this whole world. So is this something that you imagine yourself like going back to? Do you have whether or not you have ideas or not? Is this like a sandbox like to continue playing?
Yes, 100%. I would love to. And when you get to that last page of issue 4, you will say, I hope you, the reader, will say, come on. I mean, yes, I'm satisfied. The end landed, you stuck the landing, but I want to see what this is.
So it's a contained story that can transition into an ongoing if need be.
Yeah,
or if demanded by Matt and myself and everyone else that should be picking this up. Because again, that premise is fantastic.
No, thank you. Yeah, and I brought up Guardians as an influence early on. That's a hint about kind of what that last page might make you be like, oh, come on, I got to see what that is.
So we had talked a little bit about Playground and it being a really fun story of like what happens when the games on the playground come to life, or you have the powers of the playground. And now with this story, what what influences you as a writer or a creator? Like we talked a little bit about noir. Like that's one of Ed Brubaker's like bread and butters. He can write noir like no one else. And you read a story and you're like, oh, that's an Ed Brubaker story. What does Adam Rose bring to a story, and what makes people go, that's an Adam Rose story?
Well, wow, that's I consume as much as I can as a writer and a reader. I mean, I always try to read various genres. And I mean that, like, comics, yes, that's like my passion. It has been since I was 8, but fiction and plays. In fact, like I just heard about this play called the Lehman Trilogy that's like getting all these insane rave reviews, and it started as a novel in verse. I mean, it sounds crazy to me, but I'm like, that's so out of my wheelhouse. I want to know about that. So as far as like influences that, I mean, because that, I feel like that's kind of how I want to approach the question you just gave me there. I'm influenced by, in the comics world, like I love, or just to name a few, like, well, Grant Morrison would be like an older one, but I just picked up and I loved, like, immediately, Rogue Sun.
Yes,
I've got good.
I've got my variant copy and my standard edition copy right behind me.
Yeah, like Ryan Parrott. I mean, that's amazing. I just also, I've been digging Radiant Black. There's a lot of new voices out there that I'm really jiving with, and just think like just kind of speak to me in that area. But then, yeah, I mean, as far as like the detective noir or whatever, I mean, there's like this 70s classic that I read called Eddie Coyle. It's just this bleak novel that like Brubaker, I'm sure has been easily inspired by. Or, speaking of like that kind of stuff, like, those Parker graphic novels that are based on the detective novels. I love that stuff because, I mean, I'm also a prose writer. Like I have a short story that is hopefully coming out in the next month or so through a literary journal. So I don't write in one form strictly. So that, I mean, I also, like, I just finished writing a YA novel, like a straight up novel that's like a suspense kind of thriller coming of age deal that I got to like now go back through and cut all the baloney out. But I mean, I can't, comics, that's the other thing though, as far as that, when it comes to scripting a comic, and I feel like with every single one that I write, I'm it's becoming more just second nature to really just picture the turning of the page for the reader when I'm like, and just like having that moment where, like, I feel like the medium of comics is that one magical thing in our world that does exist as actual magic. Like what happens between the panels, like those gutters, like what in our brains are able to fill in like a $50 million budget scene between those gutters. And it's all yes. And as far, that's another thing in my background, way back when I was big into improv, sketch comedy and improv was my other lifeblood. I mean, Bob Odenkirk, Mr. Show, if you're familiar with that stuff at all. I just read that David Cross and Bob Odenkirk and Bob Odenkirk's son are about to do an Audible series about a fictional town in Ohio called something in the Argyles. And it sounds hysterical, and they're bringing back all the people from that. So, my influence back then with improvisation is just like always yes and with my writing. Like and especially in comics, where there's no limit. I have a scene, I think it's in issue 2, where there are these 2 celestial type beings arm wrestling and using a planet as their elbow rest. I mean, it's just, I just, you're able to give yourself permission to do whatever you want, as long as it serves the story. And then, also I've just learned as I've been writing for all these years, you have to care about the character. Like you can dress it up and have the most amazing special effects or visuals you can ask for, but if your reader doesn't care, then they're not going to stick with you.
Yeah, finding a character that you care about is definitely a big thing. When we talked about Radiant Black, that was a big thing because they get you to care about Nathan initially, and then they pull the rug out from under you, and all of a sudden Marshall's the guy you have to care
Yes.
about, and just like, whoa. And then to your point, again, I don't mean to transition this into a gushing about Radiant Black and all that stuff, but if you read Supermassive, if you have the physical copy,
I do.
there's that centerfold that folds out when they do their for lack of a better word, they're morphing from the Power Rangers. They get their powers back, and then you just pull out this like quadruple page excuse me, this quadruple page of them transforming, and it just is so cool. And like, again, your brain just fills in the effects of what that looks
Yes.
like, and it is just awesome.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
That's a thing that is like comics. I'm basically all digital these days. I just don't have room for all the
Sure.
the paper anymore. But that's the kind of thing that you can't get.
All this back here is my comics, and plus I have some over there.
That's the kind of thing you can't get on an iPad screen. You know, they try, but
Right.
like there's something about those rare occasions where you're like, oh, it's like an 8-page pulled out.
No, and you're right. I mean, I've finally been mixing digital in for myself. I have Marvel Unlimited. I'm still all floppies for my, Wednesday pulls on like main stuff, but I have been exploring Marvel Unlimited for the last like 3 months, and I dig it. And I think, that's an interesting question. I guess they said the physical book, forget comic book, was going to be dead with ebooks 10, 15
Yep.
years ago. That hasn't happened. So I hope there'll always be room for comics. Maybe we're eventually seeing a transition away from the 22-page single issue. I mean, I could see down the road, maybe that's gonna we're gonna go straight to trades. I don't know how that would work, but and of course, the wide world of Kickstarter, like that's become more than like people needing funding for things. It's like where people are going to do their comic book shopping.
Yeah. Well, I remember when DC went with the New 52, they were like, oh, we're releasing it all digitally the day it comes out in print. People were like, it's over.
Yeah,
Comics
right.
are dead.
Right.
And for now, they're hanging on.
They're hanging on. And now, they all have their different, DC's not using Diamond now, or is it Marvel? I'm getting mixed up.
I'm not sure if
I think it
either
was
of them are, but
DC. Maybe it was both. I think it was DC that skipped Diamond.
And maybe it is both.
I think you might be right, actually. I think it is DC, actually.
Okay.
I could be misremembering that, but
Times are a-changing.
as long as I say it confidently enough,
Then it's true.
well, it's
Yeah.
true.
As long as you believe it enough.
Yep.
Yeah.
So speaking of everything being collected into a trade, what made you decide to make this a mini series instead of like an OGN?
I guess because of my love of like mini series or just sync those floppy comics. Like I just always, in Source Point, when they said yes to everything, they wanted to see this start out as a series. And I think, maybe that's about, their catalog, and it just fit at the right time. I mean, eventually it will be a collected trade that will be available through them, and they have a partnership with like Barnes and Noble. And so hopefully, it'll be something down the road. If people are trade waiting, they will get their chance.
Very cool. I'm always just curious about the inside stuff. Like how was shopping the story around for you? How many different independent publishers did you go to before someone picked it up, or was it a relatively quick process?
Well, it was pretty quick. I mean, I know I went to a few places, but I had a relationship with Source Point. Like I'd met them at cons, and I pitched them some other things before, and in the middle of it all, like they seem like the right fit for this story too. Like I liked what they were doing a lot. I mean, I also I cold pitched to like Image, but that's like, going into a black hole. It feels like it's just, I don't know what's happening on the other end, but I mean, granted, as we're talking about Radiant Black and all this stuff, I mean, amazing work is coming out. Don't get me wrong, but so no, I pitched a few places, and then just Source Point came at the right time for me to be like, this is going to be where I want this to be.
And then one last piggyback kind of on that. Let me take a moment to see if I can articulate this better. Were there any hurdles to get over when you said this is going to be a mini series? Was there pushback to be like, can we make this ongoing? Or was it, this is a mini series, this is great, we're going to go with it?
No, they were all on board for it to be a mini series. I mean, I guess if anything, I, you know, there was a moment there where I thought it could have been 5 issues, but then I just kept that to myself. And then I crafted the story to be 4. It just made it, in the end, it just made more sense because I wanted it to feel like a sprint of action. And I think I would have slowed it down too much with a 5th issue. So I kept it that way. And no, Source Point was totally all on board for it. And, timing wise, as far as releasing it, April 20th is the first issue. They wanted to give it as much of a chance in this quasi, like, people are actually out and about world we're sort of, back into in some ways. I mean, I don't know. So it's they thought that this was the right time, and just that would be a good pacing for it. In fact, yeah, I just found out, like, people up at Vancouver, there's like a big comic expo that went on up there, and somebody like went to one of their booths or heard about Corollary and was all excited about it and posted on it on YouTube, which was awesome to hear.
Very cool.
Yeah, again, the premise is fantastic.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
That little snippet that they have there on previews, just it hooks you very well. It does what it needs to do. And I reached out to my comic shop immediately after reading that. I'm like, I'm interviewing this guy, not that you need to know this, but I also want this book now. So please add that to my list.
I appreciate that. No, that's great to hear.
I mean, I guess we obviously talked a lot about this book. You mentioned you had a short story coming out. Like, is there anything, if people are interested with Adam Rose, like, is there anything else you got coming up that you want to talk about, or?
Well,
Or that you
eventually
can talk about.
There is one thing that I can't talk about yet, but I'm really excited about that. It's more on the superhero movie side of life, but I had to sign a couple of NDAs to work on it. So I will be very excited to get to tell you all about that, because it's been a lot of fun to work on, and that I'm hoping I'll get to say something about it maybe by the summer. Beyond that, yeah, no, I mean, I've had some success with short stories getting published in literary journals here, there, and everywhere. So I suppose people could find them there. I'm like, my goal for the next month is to finally get my website built so people have one place they could go to see this stuff. Yeah, and Playground is still out there and available. Marcosia Entertainment, that's coincidentally a British publisher, and they're in charge of that. But it's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble. I mean, it's still around here, there, and everywhere. And I'm excited about that comic script that I said I just wrapped up, and starting to get some early glimpses of the artwork from Magenta on. So that's got me really excited. Once we're ready to start, getting that out and see what happens with it.
Awesome. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for reaching out and giving us this opportunity to talk about Corollary. Final cutoff is March 20th. So make sure you reach out to your local comic shop or wherever you buy your comics. Get that ordered if you want the physical copy, if you want the digital. I believe that should be available. That would be on Comixology. Yep. And whatever other digital services is out there. We just know I know Comixology because that's just what I use.
Yeah.
But again, Adam, thank you. And I would love to have you on again to talk about your future projects. Just let us know what your availability is.
I'd be honored. It's been awesome talking to you guys.
This has been fun. Matt is the guy who got me into comics. So it's his fault that we're doing this anyway.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course.
So again, March 20th is that cutoff date. Corollary is the book. Adam Rose is the writer. Look it up. It's fantastic. Adam, again, thank you for your time. Matt, thank you for your time. Thank you for asking some really good questions and letting me piggyback off those. And Adam, again, I look very much forward to this. And hopefully, again, we can connect in the future and talk more about future projects.
That'd be awesome. Thank you, guys.
So thanks, everyone, for listening. Adam, do you have any social media that you want to put out there?
I do have the socials. I'm trying to get better at it. My Twitter is at Adam Rose 74. And then my IG, as they say, Instagram, it's at Shazam Cap, which I got before the Shazam movie. So, I'm proud of the fact that I have that little combo there.
Make some money off that. Find the right buyer.
Matt, I know you tend to try to make your Social media is private at times, so we're not going to push you on that. You can see me. You can find me on Twitter at Josh_Scar. You can follow the podcast at Talking Smack Pod on Twitter as well. You can email the pod at tsmackpod@gmail.com. And if you want, you can like, subscribe, leave reviews. We don't ask for them too often, just because, again, we only have a listenership of like maybe 20 to 60 people, depending on the episode. I'm hoping with the celebrity endorsement of Adam Rose here that we can get a few boosts. But this is going to be a really good episode, so I'm very excited for it. And please like, subscribe. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Good Pods, Anchor. So definitely look at him up and get ready for some big things from him, because again, just from the premise of this and the things that he's got in the pipeline, it sounds like big things are coming his way. So we are very excited to see what happens. And thanks everyone for listening, and take care.